Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. I'm back, and today we're going to play, wrong finger. Today we're going to play with the flash station. Yes, we're going to set up some arrays. We're going to discuss the differences between the two arrays. Then we're going to copy some data between the arrays, and we're going to copy some data across the network, and we're going to see some stuff that you would not believe unless you saw it with your own eyes. And you're about to see it with your own eyes right now. So, I'm not going to talk anymore. Let's get on with the video right now. So the time has come to put some drives, some SSD drives in this flash station. And I'm going to have to give you all a little education about how the flash station uses RAID. It's called RAID F1. And so after we get the drives installed, we'll go over RAID F1 and what it actually means. So now, even though Synology calls this a flash station, I'm assuming you can use regular 2.5-inch spinning hard drives in here if you so chose to. However, it is designed for flash storage. So, but you know, for all intents and purposes, this NAS unit is no different than any other NAS unit they use, other than it's limited to 2.5-inch hard drives, if that makes any sense. Now, it's very important to remember that on flash storage, on this unit, you should use approved drives in your flash station. In other words, if you go onto Synology's website, they have a list of drives that have been tested with the Synology NASs, and they can tell you which ones to use. Because, you know, it's going to become critical. SSDs do have a limited lifespan, and they have predictable failure, whereas spinning hard drives, they have a lifespan, but their failure cannot be predicted as accurately as an SSD drive can be. So, be that as it may, what I want to do is show you how these little trays work. So, what you can't see is inside there are two little nubs right here and here, two little posts. Then on this side here you have these little levers to take the tension off of the drive mount. So basically you take your SSD drive, and this is a light-on SSD that we're using. And the best way I find to do it is just to, up in the front of this tray is also a lip right here. If I'm showing that properly, there's a little lip. So I just kind of put the drives in up to that lip, then lay it in there, and flip the little levers on each side. And then there you've got your SSD is securely mounted, just like that. So I have 6 of these 256 gig light-on SSD. Actually, I have 5 of them and 1 Samsung. So we're going to go ahead and install the drives now, and then we're going to go over to the computer and get the drive arrays configured. So let's just go ahead and get the drives put in. Now, I don't have 12 drives to fill this up with, and these drives are on loan from a client. Actually, they really don't care what happens to the drives, but you know, in the event of an emergency, anyway. And then here is the final drive, which is a Samsung 2.5-inch 256 gig SSD drive. So that's the one oddball in the group. Now, you're probably noticing I have these 2 slots free as well, and that's going to be for a mirrored set of drives, and that's these Kingstons. I have a couple of Kingston 120 gig SSDs that we're just going to put in there, and we'll put them in a RAID 1, or maybe we'll do a RAID 0. I haven't decided yet how to set those up. I got a little piece of hair in there, don't want that in there. Alright, so all of our drives are in place, so now it's just simply a matter of powering the unit on, and then it will come up and we'll be able to do some stuff on it. So, moment of truth. Go ahead and power it on. And initially it's drawn about 54 watts. Now this thing takes a long time to boot. I would say it takes about 5 minutes to boot. Get the dust off the top of it there. Like I said, it takes about 5 minutes to boot. And then you can get into the interface through a web browser. Now I've already done some initial setup on this. I've added it to my domain. I've gone out and done some of the basic settings and done the software install on it. So that's all configured and ready to go. So now it's just a matter of waiting for it to boot. Now what'll happen is as it gets close, you'll start seeing green lights appear on all these drives to let you know that it has seen the drives. We'll just wait for that to happen. I can hear it. Standing from here, I can hear the fan blowing on it. I don't know if you can hear that on the camera. Let me move the microphone over there. Here's the back of the unit. Here's the front of the unit. So again, not a very loud unit. And there we go. And now it's starting to light up all the drive bays. Well, before we begin in setting up the file system on those SSDs, let's make sure we understand how Synology RAID F1 works. Now, as I understand it, if you were to use a traditional RAID 5 on here, on your SSD drives, or a RAID 6 or a RAID 10, I would assume it applies to those as well. You're going to wear your drives at the same time, and there's going to be lots of random reads and writes on these drives, and that is going to wear out the drives, all of them at the same time, and create a problem when you get to the end of the lifespan on these SSD drives. So what RAID F1 does, as I understand it, is it sacrifices one of the SSD drives. The one that has the least amount of life left on it will actually be your parity drive. So, and it tells you right here, Synology RAID F1, the algorithm tackles the problem by writing more parity bits into a specific SSD to avoid all SSDs from being worn out at the same time, and making one system-assigned SSD to be worn out in the first place. And then with that approach, RAID F1 will be very unlikely to crash as data are unevenly written to SSDs. Thus, Synology RAID F1 enhances the endurance of RAID compared to other RAID algorithms, an important concern for enterprise flash storage products. Now, keep in mind, these are not enterprise-level drives, and you should go with the drives that Synology has tested and recommended into these flash systems. I'm going to use just regular consumer-grade drives because, we're just testing it here to see how it works. And then they show you the comparison between RAID 5 and RAID F1. And then the idea behind that is instead of replacing all of your SSDs when they fail at the same time, you would just sacrifice one of the SSDs. Now, I don't know how long an SSD is going to last in one of these flash systems, but I'll show you when we go to set up the RAID array how it shows the estimated lifetime of the disks left. And but you can read here the article on RAID F1 performance and what the mindset is behind RAID F1. And then, the reliability, it says right here, RAID 5 uses up all SSDs' life at the same pace, as parity is evenly distributed to all disks in the array. In this case, the possibility of data loss on an SSD failure becomes very high along with RAID aging. In contrast, RAID F1 consistently minimizes data loss probability by making one of the most aged SSDs reach the end of its lifespan in the first place. So it's very similar if you compare it to what Unraid does. So Unraid sets up 1 or 2 drives as your parity disk, and then the others as your data disk, and then fills them as it needs to. And you have 1 or 2 disks that you sacrifice for parity. So that's, in essence, what RAID F1 is doing with the Synology NAS. All right, so we're over on the flash station now, and you see it's working well. We've got it set up. It's got an IP address. We've gone ahead and done all the initial setup of the networking. I've given it a hard-coded IP address right here. So giving it 517. It knows where my DNS server is. Let's see, have I made it a part of my domain? No. Yes, I have. I went ahead and joined it to my mcstx.local domain so that we have consistent, passwords and all that between everything. Now, if we come here to Info Center, and again, this is kind of the bane of my deal with the, even with the flash station. You would think, I honestly don't know what Synology was thinking. If they just wanted this to be fast storage, because you really could use this fast storage for virtualization, but when they only put a Pentium D 1508 processor in there, a dual core processor, it really kind of limits what you can do with virtual machines, how many you can run, etc., and the resources. I think they would have been better off with a quad or an 8-core processor in this, but it is what it is, and this is kind of been my complaint about some of the Synology NASs. You would think for $1,600 they'd put a few more processors in here, but they don't. And we only have 8 gig of RAM, so that's going to limit what we can do with virtual machines. But be that as it may, let's go ahead and get our array set up. So let's close this and go over to Storage Manager. And if we come down here to hard drive SSDs, you'll see that we've got a bunch of SSDs in here. The Light-Ons, we've got Light-On, we've got a Kingston, we've got, and then here's the Samsung. So if you go down on each one of these disks and click on Health Info, this will give you an idea of how long the drive's been on and what its estimated lifespan is. Same way with this one, and you'll see some of these have, most of them are at 100% lifespan. They haven't been really utilized that much. This one's at 100%. The Kingstons give a little bit more information, like the power on time and the temperature. I don't know why the Light-Ons don't give that information. Well, they do. This one does, but no temperature. Let's see. Let's check this one. 100%. 100%. 100%. And then the Samsung, I believe it's at 92%. You see it's had 30,693 hours. So my thought is when we go to create our RAID F1 volume, that it's going to actually set up this Samsung as the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, for parity. Let's go ahead and get our array set up. So let's close this and go over to Storage Manager. And if we come down here to hard drive SSDs, you'll see that we've got a bunch of SSDs in here. The Light-Ons, we've got Light-On, we've got a Kingston, we've got, and then here's the Samsung. So if you go down on each one of these disks and click on Health Info, this will give you an idea of how long the drive's been on and what its estimated lifespan is. Same way with this one, and you'll see some of these have, most of them are at 100% lifespan. They haven't been really utilized that much. This one's at 100%. The Kingstons give a little bit more information, like the power on time and the temperature. I don't know why the Light-Ons don't give that information. Well, they do. This one does, but no temperature. Let's see. Let's check this one. 100%. 100%. 100%. And then the Samsung, I believe it's at 92%. You can see it's had 30,693 hours. So my thought is when we go to create our RAID F1 volume, that it's going to actually set up this Samsung as the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, for parity. So if we come up here to our storage pool, let's go ahead and create one. We'll create a storage pool. And we're going to use the better performance. Just accept the wizard here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up a RAID F1. I'm just going to let it call it RAID F1. Give it the RAID type. We do have other choices here. We have RAID 1, 5, 6, 10, Basic, JBOD, RAID 0, and F1. Be that as it may, it's just telling you here that the minimum number of drives per your RAID array is 3, and the maximum is 24. I'm going to click on Next here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply drag all the 238 gigabyte drives over here into the storage pool. Now watch what happens when I drag one over. It warns you these drives are not listed on the Synology products compatibility list. You can bring that up right there, and then they will let you go out and you can find out what the best drive you think or they think is for that flash station. But we're just going to go ahead and continue on, and I'm going to do this with all of these 240 gig drives. And then what it will do is it should intelligently determine which drive has the least amount of lifespan and set that aside as the parity drive. So I'm going to simply click on Next. It's warning us all the data will be erased. And it's telling me drive 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 will be used. And we'll get about 1.14 terabytes of space. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And then it's telling you need to create a volume as well to go on to that. We'll do that here in a second. Now, the other thing I want to do is create another SSD array or storage pool. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. I'm going to choose Better Performance. And we're just going to choose RAID 1, RAID type 1. We could do RAID 0. But if one of those drives were to fail, we lose all of our data. So we're just going to do RAID 1 for now. Click on Next, and then we're going to drag these two drives over. And of course, we're going to ignore the compatibility list at our own peril. And then I'm going to have it, I've already had DSM on this drive, so I'm not going to do the bad sector remapping. And then we'll click Apply. And then we're going to get the same warning message that we need to create a volume, which is what we will do. And as you can see, the storage pool background consistency parity check is running. So now I'm going to go create a couple of volumes. So we'll just use storage pool 1, RAID F1 with data protection, 1.14 terabyte. So we're going to allocate all the capacity, and we're going to use Btrfs. Next, and Apply. And then we should see our volume appear over here momentarily. I'm going to go ahead and do that again. And we're going to create a volume for storage pool 2, which is RAID 1. It'll only be 107 gigabytes, but that's okay. We can use that space. Click on Next, Btrfs, and Apply. Now what I'll let this do is go ahead and finish creating the drives and the pools, and we will let the consistency check. I'm going to expand this one here as well so we can see it here. And we'll come back once this is done. As you can see, it's moving pretty quickly with these SSD drives, and if I look behind me on the desk or on the workbench, I can see the drives flickering away doing their thing. So we'll come back when the array is created. Alright, so after thinking about it for a little while, I've decided, previously I had set up the two 120 gig SSD drives as a RAID 1. And I got to thinking to myself, what do I want more from these two, from that volume? Do I want redundancy? Do I want protection of the data? Or do I want speed? And seeing as SSDs work differently than hard drives, and they have a predicted failure on SSDs, I've just decided I'm going to put those two 120 gig drives into a RAID 1 array. So that's what I'm going to do now. It's very simple to do. So I've deleted the RAID 1 array, and I'm going to create a RAID 0 array is what I meant to say. So basically the two drives will be striped together, and we'll get the total capacity of both drives, so 240 gig of storage space. And I'm doing that for a reason, because I want to be able to test the speed within Synology transferring files from a RAID F1 to a RAID 0, so you can get an idea of how fast the Synology can actually pump data through its own interface. So let's go up here to storage pool. I'm under the storage manager under the Synology NAS. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new storage pool. I'm going to choose better performance. And then I'm going to select RAID 0. And you see the minimum number of drives is 2. Okay? So we'll just call it RAID 0. Click on next. Then I'm going to drag these two drives over. Now, it's very important you read this. I'm doing this in, like a test. Normally, you would have drives that are approved on Synology's product compatibility list, but I'm just using regular over-the-shelf or consumer grade drives, not commercial grade. So please follow these guidelines. I'm just going to go ahead and continue for the sake of this video. We'll click on next, and it's going to warn us that all the data on those drives will be erased. Now, I've already had DSM installed before, so I'm not going to do a bad sector check on these. And both drives, they're at 100%, and I'll show you that here in a second. So it's going to be drive 2 and drive 4. It's going to be RAID 0, and it gives about 214 gigs. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. Now, after I create that RAID 0 array, I need to then create a volume on it. So we'll come down here to volume, and we'll go ahead and create, and we see storage pool 2 RAID 0, and it even warns you here without data protection. Go ahead and click on next. I'm just going to accept the default. This is the name and the description of it. Next, and of course we're going to use Btrfs file system, and then apply. Shouldn't take but a couple of seconds here. Okay, so now it's created it's created my second volume as RAID 0 without data protection. So I'm not worried about the data on these. Now, normally, if you're going to use RAID 0, you do that for things like where you need really fast response time, like video editing, that kind of thing. But you do have a risk. If one of these drives were to fail in this RAID array, you lose everything. So make sure you've got backups of all the data that you have in a RAID 0 array, and on a regular basis, I might add. Well, what I need to do is create need to come to Control Panel and go create a shared folder. So I'm going to create a shared folder. We'll just call it Test RAID 0. And we're going to put that on volume 2. And apply. And we'll just accept the default permissions here. So we have a test where I've already copied some data, and then we have test RAID 0. So I'm going to come here to File Station now. So I've got this I've got this export folder here. Let's see how big that is. If we right-click and go to Properties, we'll see that we've got about 21 gig. So let's see how fast it will be if we copy this folder. So we'll right-click, choose Copy, come to Test RAID 0, and let's paste it with Override enabled. And let's see what kind of speeds we get transferring from the RAID F1 to the RAID 0. Because this is going to be the limiting factor on the network. Even on a 10 gig network, we're only going to get data out of this thing as fast as the hard drives can deliver the data to us. And even though they're SSDs, you see it started out very strong at like 350 megabytes per second, but now it's kind of slowed down to 167 megabytes per second. Still, it's almost double what we would get with gigabit networking. But this just goes to show you there's still even a little bit of a bottleneck within the Synology NAS itself, copying from a RAID 1 volume or RAID F1 volume, which is actually RAID 5, but it's a modified version. You see our speed has now come back up. A lot of this depends on the size of your files too. If you have small files, you're going to get smaller or lower transfer speeds. On big files, you're going to get that higher speed. It's just the way the blocks work on the drive. So, all right. So let's see how the transfer speeds do between RAID arrays on the Synology. You've already seen me copy a file from the RAID F1 onto the RAID 0. And now we're going to reverse that. We're going to copy a file, this one here, Guardians of the Galaxy, from the RAID 0 share to the RAID F1 share, and we're going to see how fast that does. So when I copied it from the F1 to the RAID 0, it was about 160, 180 megabytes per second. So let's see what kind of speed we get here. So we're going to right-click, we're going to copy, and then we're going to come down here to the RAID F1, and we're going to paste that onto the RAID F1 drive. And we'll see what kind of transfer speeds we get. They should be pretty good. And they are. They're about 330, 340, 300, and is that what it's going to stay at? 344. So between arrays, we're getting really good write speeds on the RAID F1, and we're getting really good read speeds on the RAID 0. But you saw a minute ago when we wrote to the RAID 0, it was capped at about 160 megabytes per second. So let's let this copy finish. And we're coming into the home stretch. And even the copy procedure uses about 30% CPU. Copy is pretty intensive on the CPU. So there it took just a couple of minutes to copy the file. So it's definitely quicker writing to the RAID F1 just between the two RAID arrays on the Synology, not even including the copying across the network. All right, so it's time to have some fun. Let's do some tests and see what kind of speeds we get on our 10 gig network. So what I'm going to do is copy Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a 27 gigabyte file. We're going to copy that first to the RAID 0, and then we're going to copy it to the RAID F1, which are set up on the FS1018, as you can see here. So I'm going to open RAID 0, I'm going to drag, and I'm going to drop to the RAID 0 array. And let's see what kind of speeds we get. So initially they're really good. They're coming down a bit. So let's see, it looks like about 166 megabytes, or 1.65 or 1.5 gigabits per second. So about 500 megabytes per second faster than a regular gigabit connection. So I'm going to let this copy finish, and then I'll come back when there's something else to say. Now, one of the things I really like about Drive Bender, I know this is a video about the disk, or I mean the flash station 1018, but on the side that I'm copying from, which is a Windows 2019 server, I love that it gives me the read speed on the hard drives and the IOPS. That's really something I enjoy seeing. And you can see they kind of compare up here with the transfer speeds, and they compare up here with the Microsoft reported speeds. I'm not using Total Command or anything like that. I just wanted to use the File Explorer built within Windows to do the copy, to show everybody when Windows is operating properly and SMB3 is operating properly. You get really good transfer speeds across Windows networks is what I'm trying to say. This is why so many companies use Windows networks, but the Synology is keeping up just fine, as you can see. So we'll let this finish. We've got about another 25 seconds. So this just shows you what putting a couple of SSDs in a RAID 0 will do. You're doubling. Well, you're almost doubling your speed over a gigabit, but you're getting about a 500 megabyte per second increase over gigabit. So that by itself is not a good reason to upgrade to 10 gigabit. So let's try now with the RAID F1 share. And let's copy that same file over. Are you ready? Okay, keep an eye on everything. All right, you can see our speeds. Now is it going to maintain that speed? Now look down at Drive Bender. You can see the read speed, megabytes per second. You can see the IOPS. You can see right over here the speed that we're transmitting this file at, and it coincides with this one up here and pretty much this one down here. And you see how close we are getting to 10 gigabit. That is phenomenal. That was a phenomenal speed increase. All right, so now that I've had some time to play with it some more, I should have said that last copy was phenomenal because I can't recreate that speed. I copied one file onto the RAID F1 array, and then any other files I started copying on there are copying at closer to 1.5 gigabits per second. Let me show you. Let's just copy Guardians of the Galaxy again over to the RAID F1, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if I drop it there and I tell it to replace, you'll see that our speeds start out pretty strong. Well, call me a liar. It's doing it again. Now, I'm going to show you something. It's an anomaly. I don't know what's causing this, but it's starting out strong, right? (800 megabytes per second), 900, 700, 600. Okay, and then we'll just give it a minute to kind of recover. And let's try it again. Well, I don't know what's going on, folks. Honest to God, this was not... Anytime I copied one file over there, you know, they used to have a saying when I worked at the computer store, if you want it to break, you give it to Joe, he'll break it. Let's just, we'll just see how this completes. Hang on a second. This is going to make a liar out of me. All right. So there you go. Twice, 3 times now. Let's go to the video folder and let's copy it over here. See what happens. Well, it's going to make a liar out of me, folks. It was not doing this last night, I promise you. What would happen is the first time I would copy a file over, it would do it at this phenomenal speed. And then any time I got any more files into these directories, they would copy at a much lower speed. But for some reason today, it's not doing it. So let me find another large file. We'll do Shrek again. You can see I've got Shrek on there. So we'll come to my, let's go to my animated folder. We'll go down to Shrek. And we'll try copying Shrek again, just for shits and giggles, and replace it. And there you go. This is what I'm talking about. It seems anytime I copy Guardians of the Galaxy, it copies at 800 megabytes per second, but anything else I copy after that only copies at about 1.7 gigabits per second, or 177 megabytes per second. So, yeah, I am perplexed as to why it's doing this. All the drives, it isn't Drive Bender, it isn't the Windows server, isn't the problem. The problem is the Synology flash station. I don't know why it's doing that. And you can see I've tried this with several different large files. It doesn't matter. The Guardians always copies over fairly quickly, and the rest of the files never achieve that speed. Don't know what it is. Haven't got a clue. If you do, leave it down in the comments section. I don't even know where to start with this. All right, so I've waited about 5-6 minutes now. So let's go ahead and copy this file over again and see if we get any better performance this time. I'm going to replace it, and there you go. So all I did was wait 5 minutes to copy this file back over, and now you see our speeds are back up 700-800 megabytes per second. So I'm going to let this finish. Then we're going to wait another 5 minutes, so make note of the time. So at 10:10 I'll come back, and we'll copy Shrek over there and see if we can get these speeds with Shrek, because I guarantee you we won't. But we will if we copy this file. All right, so we'll let this finish. All right, so we're going to wait 5 minutes now. It's 10:05, so we'll wait till about 10:10 or 10:11. 10:11 I'll wait to give it a true 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll copy Shrek over, and we'll see what kind of difference in speed we get. All right, so let's try. It's been 5 minutes. Let's try it again. Let's copy Guardians of the Galaxy. Drag it, drop it, tell it to replace. And our speeds are back up to 800 megabytes per second. Now, folks, you're seeing this with your own eyes. I waited 5 minutes, right? Copying Guardians again, just so we can all see it. Let it finish, because I just wanted you to see it's consistent. If I wait 5 minutes, at least on Guardians of the Galaxy, and try to copy it again, I get my full 800 megabytes per second. All right. Please take note of the time. It's now 10:12. We'll be back at 10:17, and we're going to copy Shrek next time, as promised. But I just wanted you to see that if I wait 5 minutes, Guardians of the Galaxy comes over at the full 800 megabytes per second. All right, so it is 10:17 a.m. Let's go back to our animated folder, and let's find... we can do Shrek. We can do Shrek 2, because I believe Shrek 2 is also... Yeah, it's a 17 gigabyte file. So let's do Shrek 2. Let's just see what happens. Drag it, drop it. And you can see we're back down to 165, 150 megabytes per second. So, folks, I don't know. You've seen it with your own eyes. These speeds are, well, they're acceptable. They're almost double gigabit speed. They're pretty close to it, 1.5 gigabits per second. So, you know, I guess I shouldn't complain, but boy, it would be nice to get that 800 megabyte per second copy speed at all times. But just, this is the kind of stuff nobody would believe me if I told them, hey, this is what's happening to me. So, I don't know if Synology is going to be watching this video. Maybe they can help me understand it. I misspoke. I didn't order Cat 6 cable. I've ordered a 25-foot Cat 7 shielded cable, just to eliminate that as being the issue. I personally don't think that's what the issue is, but we'll come back and revisit this at some other time. The point is, we've got the drive set up, and we've able to get better than gigabit speed on our 10 gig network. So for right now, I'm going to consider this a win, and we're not going to let it stop us from moving forward on evaluating this Synology flash station. So you've seen it now with your own eyes. Leave your comments down in the comment section as to what you think it might be. All the drives are the same in this Dell server. The speeds are the same on them. So I don't really think that's the issue. I think I don't know whether it's caching on the Synology side or what, but there you go. You've seen it with your own eyes. It seems that Guardians of the Galaxy copies at normal speed or at high speed, but for some reason the other ones don't. And just since I have you here captive, let's go ahead and copy it over again. And I think you're going to find that it copies at the slower speed. Yeah. So a little bit faster than actually Shrek 2 did, but there you go. What more can I say, YouTube? You've seen it with your own eyes. I have no idea why one file seems to transfer better across the network than any others, and why it's not consistent. The only thing I can figure is that I don't know something. You know, we've ordered a Cat 7 cable, a shielded one, so that I can be assured that it's not the Cat 5 cable that I'm using, or Cat 5e, which should be okay for 10 gig Ethernet up to 45 meters. At least that's what all the literature says. So at this point, I don't know why these speeds are all over the place. We start, and in theory, these controllers are only capable of delivering, at best, 6 gigabits per second. So why we're getting 8 gigabit transfer speeds on that initial file, I'm baffled, perplexed, and confused. So if any of you out there, and you've seen it with your own eyes, what's happening to me, if anybody else can figure out why the heck this might be doing it, I'm hoping Synology, or somebody that represents Synology, might be watching one of these videos and might be able to chime in on it. But if you know perhaps why this might be happening, please leave your comments down in the comments section, because I would love to know what your thoughts are on these all over the place drive copy speeds. Network copy speeds, I should say. Well, anyway, that being said, we hope you found the video entertaining and informative as always. Please give us a thumbs up down below. Leave your comments in the comments section. We take PayPal, we take Patreon if you're inclined to donate. We're still trying to get the money together for our Ryzen 5 3000, 3600 chip motherboard and RAM. We're going to build a new unit out of that, and then we're going to take the parts from this unit and build a new Unraid server so we can play around with the Unraid. Now, we still have that flash station to get through, and you see I'm taking it kind of step by step. The first one was basically an introduction. This one was how to get your drive set up and testing drive copy speeds and network transfer speeds. The next episode of this flash station is going to be about getting virtual machines up and running on the flash station, and then comparing them to how they run on another hypervisor. So you've got that to look forward. So please don't forget, come back and see us again, and that we will see all of you on the other side.